Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kent Lassman. I'm the president at the Competitive Enterprise Institute. And this afternoon, I'm very excited to host a conversation with one of our senior fellows, Ben Lieberman, and a dear friend, Donna Jackson. We are going to be talking about appliance regulation. Joining us partway through the program, we're expecting two members of the House of Representatives. We'll introduce them as they're able to join. The first that we're expecting is Representative Rick Allen from Georgia, and also CEI's good friend Gary Palmer of Alabama. During this second half, or the latter portion of the program, we'll also try to feature your questions for the congressman and for Donna and for Ben. So please don't hesitate to send the questions in. There's an opportunity at the bottom of your screen to click on one of the buttons and type in a message, and that will be filtered right here to me at the desk, and we'll get all the information for you that you need. Again, this is the Competitive Enterprise Institute, and today we've planned a program so that you can learn more about what's happening with appliance regulation. And there's no one better suited, not just here today, but no one better suited anywhere to tell you about what's happening at the various federal agencies and in the courts, and has been happening now for a generation as it relates to home appliance regulation, than my friend Ben Lieberman. I'm going to ask Ben to give us a background. We'll get that lay of the land on what's happening before we turn to Donna Jackson. So Ben, what the heck is going on with home appliances, water heaters, dishwashers, refrigerators, gas stoves? The list is extensive. And why is it that the federal government has so much interest, and what are they doing? Just teach me what's happening.
Well, thanks, Kent. And thanks to Representatives Allen and Palmer, not just for participating in today's webinar, but more importantly, for their legislative efforts on behalf of consumers on this issue. My name is Ben Lieberman. I'm a senior fellow at the Competitive Enterprise Institute, where I've written a paper called Free the Appliances, Turn Out the Lights on Federal Efficiency Standards. It's available at CEI.org. Well, I'd like to kick things off by pointing out that we're coming up on the 3-year anniversary of the gas stove controversy. If you remember, it was January of 2023 that a Biden administration official said that gas stoves may need to be banned in favor of electric stoves. And that set off a very powerful and very grassroots consumer backlash. Turns out the American people do not like being told by Washington what they can and cannot have in their homes. Now, fortunately, the Biden administration did back off at least somewhat on stove regulations. But as I point out in my paper, it isn't just stoves. And in fact, nearly every home appliance has been subjected to multiple rounds of successively worse regulations over the last several decades. And my organization, the Competitive Enterprise Institute, has been pushing back against these regulations for very nearly as long. As I note in my paper, washing machines have been regulated 6 times, dishwashers 4 times, refrigerators 4 times, air conditioners 3 times, water heaters multiple times, furnaces multiple times. And several of these are going to be hit with yet another round of standards that were enacted during the previous administration and will take effect in the years ahead. Now, nearly every one of these regulations raises the upfront cost of these appliances, and in some cases more than is likely to be earned back in the form of marginal energy savings. For example, the next electric water heater standard is estimated by the agency, by the Department of Energy, to raise costs by $953 when it takes effect. The next light bulb standard will very nearly double the price of a light bulb. And these are Department of Energy estimates, which have a tendency to be on the low side. Now, beyond costs, several of these regulations compromise product features, performance, reliability, longevity. For example, dishwashers now typically take about 2 hours to do a normal load of dishes, which is nearly twice what it took before the federal government started regulating them. Washing machines require more maintenance, and some say they don't clean as well. Refrigerators don't last as long, and the list goes on and on. Other regulations have completely eliminated a particular option that some consumers prefer, even though this is forbidden by the law. That's why, for example, incandescent light bulbs are no longer available. And that's why the next furnace standard will forbid gas-fired non-condensing furnaces, which are the best option for many millions of older homes. Now, some of these regulations have also been justified in part by climate change considerations, and that is that the social cost of carbon became a finger on the scale justifying more and more stringent regulations during the previous administration. We also saw regulations used to disfavor the natural gas version of appliance in favor of the electric version. And all of this is to the further detriment of consumers and to consumer choice. Now, fortunately, elections do have consequences. We have an administration with a very different perspective on these regulations. And the Department of Energy is taking some steps to change some of these regulations. And in particular, they're revising the regulations for washing machines and dishwashers. And this should provide some relief. But I should add that anything that's done at the agency level can be undone by a subsequent administration. And that's what we saw when a number of reforms from the first Trump administration were repealed by the Biden administration. And that's why legislation provides more permanent relief. And on that front, Mr. Allen's bill, the Don't Mess With My Home Appliances Act, has a number of useful reforms. For one thing, it makes it easier for the agency to revisit past regulations and fix those that haven't turned out as well as expected. It also forbids the use of climate change as a consideration. And it raises the bar on future regulations by requiring a more stringent analysis from the agency that these regulations will save more than they cost. Now, I think as we saw from the gas stove backlash of 2023, the American people do not want this kind of meddling with their home appliances. I think this has the makings of an 80-20 issue, and that's why I am very optimistic about some of the reforms at the agency level and with legislators like Mr. Allen and Mr. Palmer who are doing some very useful things on this front. Thank you.
Ben, just one question before I turn to Don. I want to get you involved in this conversation very quickly here. Okay. But you said something there that I think is very instructive about the entire regulatory state. And I'd like you to just unpack it, if you could, for 20 or 30 seconds. The way the statutes are written today, as it relates to these home appliance regulation, the agency has a choice to either leave the regulation as it is or make it more strict. But is it the case that they're not allowed to remedy a mistake that a previous regulator has made? So it's a ratchet. They can never go and adjust if they've overregulated in the past. Is that how it operates?
There's the anti-backsliding provision in the underlying statute that, for the most part, makes it difficult to undo an existing regulation. Essentially, you can't set a new regulation less stringent than the previous one. There are a few exceptions to that, but this new bill, the Don't Mess With My Home Appliances Act, allows more flexibility for the agency to revisit past regulations. And when you think about it, do we really want to engage in the fiction that regulators don't make mistakes? It's obviously that they have on many appliances. And so some provisions in this bill would change the anti-backsliding provision and allow a revisiting of past standards that are causing problems for consumers.
So, Donna, you've worked a great deal on these issues from your home with the organization Committee for Constructive Tomorrow, our friends at cfact.org. One of the trade-offs that the regulators are always trying to get their arms around, or at least we hope they would analyze, is a question about these costs that Ben was highlighting, the $929 expense that's added from these new standards, the doubling of the price of a light bulb. Is affordability something that really has been part of the debate at the regulatory agencies? And tell us about that. How does this affect at the household level the way Americans are consuming things?
And I'm glad you talked about that because number one, well, let me highlight something. He's talking about the regulators and what you brought off. Can they relook at this? We never factor in the fact of careerism, and we never factor in self-interest. So what we've done is incentivize more regulations as opposed to making sure that we have the best consumer choices and efficiency in these appliances. That's the reason why when you look at, and I hate to, make the analogy between Black communities, the reason why you always have people on welfare and you never have a war on poverty, you have a war for poverty, is because the incentive is to create more regulations that become overly burdened on consumers. The cost is always a factor. We talk a lot about the supply and demand side, right? We never talk about price elasticity of demand. That means consumers are sensitive to incremental price increases.
This is not Valentine's Day, and that is my love language right there. So,
So
please keep at it.
yeah, because when you add an incremental cost to a price of an appliance, a price of anything, you're going to automatically price out a number of people because people are very sensitive to price. And that's the other thing that people don't take into account. Yeah, it's an extra $200, an extra $1,000. But guess what? You price out 115,000 potential homeowners when you add an extra $1,000. It's the same. If you're going to the store and buying butter versus margarine, if the price goes up, people are price sensitive. We need to talk about that side of demand because you're always going to have consumers that are priced out.
What, tell me a little bit more about, I know you've been up to testify to Congress on this in the last maybe year and a half. What sort of questions are the members of Congress and their staff asking you for help on? We're going to have a chance to talk to a couple members in a moment, but I wonder what sort of, how have they come up to speed on these issues and what do they ask of you to help them with?
Amazingly enough, they don't hear enough from people like me that actually cares about the consumers. They hear about academians and people who are saying, oh, we love all these regulations. They don't hear about the pain that they're causing people in minority and low income community that are disproportionately impacted by increased costs. We're pricing out thousands of people out of the American dream. And you know what? I always tell people, if you think it doesn't impact you, listen to this. 22% of our GDP goes to welfare transfer programs for people who are not financially, economically stable, that these barriers that they put up there stops us from economic upward mobility. If we get people who are self-sufficient, and home ownership is absolutely one of those pathways, then we don't have to pay for people's rent assistance. We don't have to pay for people's food with food stamps programs. All of these kind of things impact consumer, it impacts everyone. The way to self-sufficiency, the way to reduce our deficit is to make sure that people have a pathway that they can not only take care of themselves with financial stability, but they can also leave intergenerational wealth behind. So we're not doing what we're doing today. We're taking care of 3 generations of people that can't take care of themselves because the American dream has been pushed out of the way.
But Ben, your study before getting into the current landscape, it provides a very helpful history. a good deal of what we're dealing with here are programs designed initially in 1975 to limit energy consumption. That was an era when there was oil crisis, oil shock. There was the idea that we could just put on a sweater, everybody would be fine during the winter, turn down the thermostat. This law has been amended and updated subsequently, I think first in 1987. Is it the case that we're simply dealing with something that was designed poorly from the jump, and we're tinkering with amendments and changes and trying to restrict the agencies when really perhaps they don't have a role at all determining the level of energy consumption in a household? Isn't that something that these consumers can sort out for themselves?
Oh, absolutely. I think the history of this issue is that there was the Arab oil embargo in 1973, and in response to it, Congress went insane on energy policy. Things that didn't even make sense in that context, but they are still on the books. Now, I would give credit to the Department of Energy. They were reluctant at first to set these energy efficiency standards. The Reagan administration thought that they would do more harm than good, and I think they were on to something. But over time, through litigation, the Department of Energy was forced to set standards. And then once the agency starts doing that, it's really hard to stop. As I've mentioned, most home appliances have been hit with 3, 4, 5, even 6 rounds of successively tighter standards. And now climate change is a rationale for yet more rounds of standards. There was during the previous administration. The law of marginal returns, I think that ended in the 1980s or 90s. Now we're well into the point of negative returns. But we have both regulators inside the government, but a whole army of activists and lobbyists and lawyers and consultants outside the agency that would like to see all this continued. And I think we're clearly at the point of overregulation. And that's why it's good to see these reform bills like the Don't Mess with My Home Appliances Act.
Now, I think each of you have partially or mostly answered our first question from the audience. We had a question from David, who asks, who's behind all of these onerous regulations? And he's asking further, who writes the rules and who is exactly paying for them to write rules that make it more difficult for us to manage our household finances? I think I've heard you say it's agency staff. And now in addition to the careerist impulse, Donna, that you were talking about, you're adding, there's a lobbying component. Did we leave anyone out? Are there lawmakers who stand up in the well of the Senate and say, goodness, we need more of this? Who is it that we're about to ask lawmakers about the support they've had for their legislative proposals, but who is it that's actively opposing these common sense legislative proposals?
Well, it's been caught up in the environmental agenda. So anybody that supports the climate agenda, anyone who supports the shift to alternative energy also supports these efficiency standards. Now, I would argue putting the American people on an energy diet is not the answer. More supply is the answer. As much supply as makes sense in the marketplace. But we do see a number of legislators who support these measures. It changed a little bit with the gas stove controversy of a few years ago, as I mentioned. I think Washington was stunned at how angry the public was when they first learned what was going on with, the potential restrictions on gas stoves. And I think it was a wake-up call to Washington that the public doesn't like this stuff. So that, I think, was a healthy thing, and I think maybe it makes more reform efforts possible.
And don't underestimate environmentalists and the not in my backyards, the NAMBYs, who want to make sure that they create artificial scarcity, and they want control over individuals and how much energy they can get. I mean, if I want to limit the number of people if I want to and I know people don't like that. If I want to depopulate the earth, the only thing I need to do is to make sure that people's standard of living decreases. And we've seen the greatest decline because of environmental policies, because people live longer when they're healthier, when we have energy, when we have things that the American people can live a healthy, prosperous life. So if I want to make sure my property value goes up, I make sure that you don't create, I create energy components that limit the housing, the number of people that can afford housing, the number of people that can use energy, and then I prosper more.
So one of the people leading to put more of this decision making back in the hands of consumers, put more flexibility into the marketplace so that we have different options for what types of products, appliances are going to suit our household. Different households are going to have different needs. I know my own household changed in its level of needs when my twins got out of diapers, for example. Is representative from Georgia, Mr. Rick Allen. I believe he's online with us. Hello, Representative. Thank you for joining us.
Hey there, Kent. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you just fine. We've just
Right.
had a background on the issue from Ben and Donna. And if it suits you, what I'll do is turn it over to you to tell our audience online what you have been doing in the Congress, the legislative effort that you've been leading, and the key components of the fight that you see in front of you for the second half of the 119th Congress when it relates to appliance regulation. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much, and good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar hosted by CEI on federal efficiency standards. I'd also like to give Ben Lieberman a special thank you for testifying before the Energy and Commerce Energy Subcommittee on this pressing issue that impacts families not just in my district, but across the country. For those who do not know me, I am Congressman Rick Allen, and I have the honor of representing Georgia's 12th District. This is my second term as a member of the Energy and Commerce Committee, which has broad jurisdiction over all issues and policies powering America's economy. This Congress, I've been proud to lead my colleagues in introducing H.R. 4626, the Don't Mess with My Home Appliances Act. As we all know, under the guise of energy efficiency, the Biden-Harris administration waged a 4-year war on domestic energy and consumer choice, and it was American families that paid the price. From gas stoves, refrigerators and freezers, to washers, dryers, dishwashers, and air conditioners, no household appliance was off limits in their pursuit of a radical rush to green agenda. Simply put, we cannot allow that to happen again. In fact, in the district, everybody I talked to wanted to know why, when they had to replace their air conditioning unit today, it costs 4 times what it cost to install it initially. As far as appliances are concerned, obviously my wife, I tell folks back home, I never thought in my in my wildest imagination that I'd be on the House floor defending my wife's new gas stove. So that gets to the Don't Mess with My Appliances Act, which has been advanced by our committee, and it implements necessary reforms to the Energy Policy and Conservation Act, EPCA, to prevent future administrations from prioritizing a radical rush to green agenda over the affordability and availability and of reliable household appliances that Americans rely on every day. These things need to be market driven. These folks, we are making tremendous progress on reducing carbon emissions and providing efficiencies. Congress enacted EPCA in 1975 to increase energy production, reduce demand, and encourage a more efficient use of energy. As part of this effort, EPCA authorized DOE's Appliance and Equipment Standards Program to set minimum energy efficiency standards for product categories. DOE must follow specific statutory criteria for prescribing new and amended standards for covered products and covered equipment. However, over the last several years, DOE has gone way beyond its scope of statutory authority by finalizing rules that do not meet the specific statutory criteria. These egregious appliance standards have caused homeowners to spend 34% more on appliances than they did just 15 years ago, while having to replace them at a faster rate. Again, this is why my bill makes reforms that will eliminate DOE's requirements to review and update energy conservation standards every 6 years, establish a new process to allow standards to be revoked or revised, and amend the statutory criteria for determining whether an energy conservation standard is economically justified. These are common sense changes that will ensure certainty for manufacturers and consumers while protecting consumer choice. American families do not want the government mandating what appliances they can and cannot use. House Republicans are going to fix that, and I'm looking forward to the bill's consideration on the House floor. I want to thank CEI again for hosting today's webinar. I hope you all have a Merry Christmas and a blessed New Year. I look forward to taking some of your questions.
Thank you, Congressman. But very quickly, before I turn to your colleague there in the House of Representatives, our friend Gary Palmer of Alabama, you mentioned how eager you are to see your legislation pass on the House floor. Do you have an indication from the leadership team or from the floor managers about when they would be ready to do it? Are they giving you a certain number of co-sponsors you have to have, or is there a timeline for when you'll get it through rules and all the way up to the floor process? Because we're very eager to see that happen, and we want to share the news with our audience if you need help on any part of that, any step of the way.
Yes, well, unfortunately, the government shutdown set us behind. I would think we probably would have done this even before Christmas. We're playing catch up right now. It's in the lineup. Like I said, it's passed through committee. It's in the lineup. It's ready to go. The next step is, do we have the votes? You have to go through that process. But I think, I would hope it's bipartisan. I hope some of my colleagues on the other side realize that, actually, we won the gas stove battle. We saved my wife's gas stove because it got to be known that the vice president had a gas stove in her home. And so that word got out, and all of a sudden that issue went away. It's amazing. This is the former vice president. Vice President Harris. So, again, the leader hadn't given me any indication. We're playing catch up. That's why we're working all week this week. And but I would hope very, very soon that we will have this on the House floor for a vote.
All right. Thank you. That's Congressman Rick Allen of Georgia. If you can stay with us, as long as you're able to stay with us, we will welcome you. We'll get some questions from our audience. But first, I want to introduce Representative Gary Palmer. He represents a district right near Birmingham, Alabama. Gary's worked on commerce and energy-related questions in the House for a good long while now. And I hope, Gary, you can hear me. And if you wouldn't mind, tell us about your approach to these questions. And you should know, as a backdrop, we've had a very good grounding on what appliance regulation is all about and where it came from under the statutes from both Donna and Ben.
Well, first of all, it's great to see you guys. I have a long history with CEI as running a think tank and part of the State Policy Network. And Kent, you may or may not remember this, but we at Alabama Policy Institute, we published a book called Facts Not Fear that CEI had a big role in, and had a pretty big impact on environmental education, I think. But in regard to the topic at hand, the Democrats really pushed the idea of these regulating natural gas appliances as a way to reduce costs. And the fact of the matter is, it didn't do that at all. It actually increased cost. I think Ben does a good job with his paper, Free the Appliances, that this is not reasonable conservation. It's just part of the Green New Deal. Their war on natural gas and any hydrocarbon power generation. It's They've really tried to shame people into buying all electric appliances. And the interesting thing is, and you guys may remember this, back when home builders, well, not the home builders, but the power companies were really advertising hard for all electric homes. They don't do that anymore. There's a reason for that. As they understand the demands on the power grid coming up is going to make it very difficult to provide for all electric homes. I've talked personally to people in the power generation business that they don't want all electric. They support gas appliances. I think there's another issue here on the affordability side. There's a lot of angst out there about the price of housing. And by the way, that's overstated. They claim that the average price of a starter home nationwide is $400,000. That's pure bullcrap. That's a technical term for it's not true. I mean, for instance, in Cleveland, the average price for a starter home is $165,000. But one of the things that's driven new home prices up is regulations, and that includes appliances. It all adds in to whether or not somebody can actually afford to buy a new home or even move into an older home. Is regulatory cost is added in some places up to $15,000 a year just in rental for paying rent. So I think what a lot of our manufacturers have found themselves doing is basically having to make products that most people don't want and that in many cases they can't afford, whether it's range top or hot water heater, you name it. This is another indication of how the far left, that basically runs the Democratic Party now, has pushed these mandates on people. They did it through the Green New Deal, and it's one of the reasons why we saw inflation hit the levels that it did. And it's not just on. The funny thing is, it's not just on the cost of the new appliances. It's how much energy cost has gone up for homes. We just had a member day for the Energy and Commerce Committee this last Friday, and one of the Democrats, but I think it's a freshman, came in and talked about how Republican policies have made energy costs so high in California, how it's harming people trying to make a living. And I'm thinking, what planet did you come from? I mean, the energy cost in California is a self-imposed disaster, and they've hit everything from the fuel standards that the Supreme Court just struck down to appliances to homes. It's everything. So I think we're in a position now to convince the public that our policies are the right policies, that we want to be able to choose whatever appliance best meets their needs for themselves, for their families, and that we're working 24/7 to bring down energy costs. As I just left a meeting earlier today, and I made this point that the most inflationary component in the economy is energy. There's an energy cost in everything, and I think that people are they're already seeing their gasoline for their automobiles come down. And I'm happy to say I saw gas at $2.34 a gallon in Alabama. I don't think it'll ever get to that point in California. So I'll be happy to talk about this. I also want to talk a little bit about critical minerals. We're I think, in a national security crisis because of our dependence on China for processed and refined critical minerals and rare earth elements, particularly the rare earth elements. It's not only an economic emergency, it's a national security emergency. And there's not a single major refinery for rare earth elements in the Western Hemisphere. If I said there wasn't one in the United States, that'd be problematic enough, but there's not one in the Western Hemisphere. There's only 9 in the world. 8 are in China. The other one's in Malaysia. And thank God it's a private company, Linus, an Australian company. And that's one of the things that I've really taken the lead on in the House is securing our supply chain. And I'm working directly with the White House on this. They've got exactly the right guy leading this effort. We're making some deals, foreign deals with foreign countries and foreign entities. We're aggregating what we have here in the U.S. In terms of companies that have some capacity for processing and refining. Those top 2 tiers are really aimed at meeting our immediate needs. But that third tier that I think is absolutely critical for us is to build out our own processing and refining capabilities here to ensure this. And I think we've got about a 5-year window to do it. China has lifted their embargo for 1 year. I think they did that thinking that Americans would go to sleep at the wheel again. But I can assure you guys that we're not taking our foot off the gas. So for that, I'll be happy to take any questions.
Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hunt. I have a tablet here in front of me where I'm getting the questions from our audience. I'm going to look through that very briefly. But while I do that, Donna, you're a refugee from California.
Yes.
Ben, you've been up to testify over and over again. Do either one of you want to react to what we heard from Representative Allen or Palmer? But while I hunt for a question here.
Yeah, so I want to touch on California's unaffordability because that's a place that I have come from. When you think about California, they have the 5th largest economy, but if you factor in the cost of living expenses, according to the U.S. Census, they're number 1 in poverty and housing is the primary factor. And it's because California, if you look at today, our regulations, a lot of those federal regulations that are on our appliances actually mirror what was pioneered in California. And more than 17 states are actually following their lead. They have building codes that are repressive towards working class families. I'm just going to add this one and I'm done. In California, because of all these regulatory costs with appliances, 91% of Latinos cannot afford a medium price home. Cannot. 90% of African Americans cannot afford a medium price home. 87% of white Americans cannot afford a medium price home, and it's because of their environmental policies and these punitive building codes that they have on all of the appliances in that state that they've been implementing.
Donna, one of the things that came up in that member meeting last Friday from the representative from California was concerns about asthma. And one of the biggest predictors of asthma is income. And to your point about California has the highest poverty rate and some of the worst housing for lower income people, that's one of the things that really exacerbates asthma is poor living conditions. They have killed their economy, making it very difficult to bring in what most of us consider good paying blue collar jobs. And it's forced people to live in conditions that exacerbate asthma. But you can look at it as income levels go up, as people's housing improves, asthma rates go down.
Just to put a fine point on that, Congressman, we're very fortunate here in America that our poor housing still allows people to live unhealthy lives. The leading cause of death for women in the world is indoor air quality. Mm-hmm. And that's because so many people in sub-Saharan Africa are relying on fuel in a fire that is either wood or dung. And so when we take these policies all the way to their logical conclusion, we're talking about ending people's lives earlier through very bad health outcomes. And what you and Donna are talking about here, I put this in the category of not just economics, not just regulatory economics, but this is a moral issue.
Look at
It's essential that we get this right for Americans.
even look at what happened in Europe in the winter of, I think it's 22, 23. This was written up in The Economist, number one's idea of a right-wing publication, that 67,000 people were classified as excess winter deaths, not because they froze to death, because they couldn't afford to adequately heat their homes. And it's particularly a problem for people with cardiovascular or respiratory conditions. 67,000 is more than were killed than died from COVID. I attribute it directly to the government policies, particularly in Germany and other places, because people simply couldn't afford their utility bills to adequately heat their homes.
We have a question here from Frank. He reminds us, he's absolutely correct, Section 112 of the Clean Air Act allows the EPA to effectively legislate. And that's in the absence of congressional action. And his question, I think, is pretty straightforward. Should Congress not correct this violation of the separation of powers? Do either one of you two gentlemen want to tackle that question about the extraordinary leeway we've given the EPA in this country?
Rick, if it's okay, the Supreme Court addressed this in West Virginia versus EPA when it addressed whether or not the EPA had the authority to regulate greenhouse gases. That was a major step forward. It's not only happened at the Supreme Court, it's happened at the state court level with the Ohio Supreme Court. What has happened since then is in the Inflation Reduction Act, which was passed right after the EPA versus West Virginia or West Virginia versus EPA. They put into their reconciliation bill that EPA had that authority. The parliamentarian in the Senate declared that reconcilable, declared that it complied with the Byrd Rule. In the One Big Beautiful Bill, or as we call it now, the Working Family Tax Cuts, we removed that. Parliamentarian in the Senate, same person that made the ruling for the Democrats, said it wasn't Byrdable. It was not reconcilable. So we've made an initial attempt at addressing the EPA's authority to basically legislate through regulation. I think there's more to come, but I really do think that the parliamentarian in the Senate needs to be replaced.
Now, Representative Allen, we just heard about the Senate.
Yes.
What sort of interest have you had in your legislation from senators?
Well, from the standpoint, the Senate is, takes 60 votes. And unfortunately, right now, it's very difficult for us to get to 60 because we cannot, we've had Senator Fetterman and a few others that have, that have joined us to try to deal with the government shutdown. If those folks hadn't stood up, this government would still be shut down. And you're talking major problems of heating and health and everything else. Just it continued. They just not. They can't get to the 60 vote over there because of the leadership in the Senate on the Democratic side will not listen to reason and those things that are just plain common sense. It is us against them. And that's unfortunate for the American people. Very unfortunate. And it's driven by politics. It's driven by the fact that they're worried about primaries from their left, not the middle, to their left. So they're having to take these extreme stances of blocking everything because of a situation where they might be primaried by someone further to the left. And so it's very difficult right now to govern under these circumstances. That's the first thing. However, in the Supreme Court, we won the Chevron case. Now, that puts a lot more responsibility on the United States Congress. We need to be, all of our appropriations needs to be more specific, more directed, and to take away the ability for these agencies to get outside of those guardrails. We've got to do a better job at that. And we've got to hold them, and the courts are going to hold them inside those guardrails. But I think, Congress, we appropriate, the administration then applies the appropriations to the appropriate legislation or funding agency. And the agency should follow strict guidelines of the United States Congress. But unfortunately, many of the administrations have, gotten outside of that with executive orders. And but these executive orders, once that administration, it turns out, they're not law. We need to codify more of these things into law that protect the next administration, or protects the American people from the next administration that might go to the extremes that the Biden administration went to.
Ben, we're a little bit past 3/4 of the time we have allotted for the program. Did you want to respond to anything that you've heard so far, either from Donna or the congressman?
Well, I do think we certainly hope the Senate takes up appliance standards reform. But even if not, we've gotten a very good discussion, a very good dialogue started on the House side with the House Energy and Commerce hearings, with the Don't Mess with My Home Appliances Act. I think this really has the makings of an 80-20 issue. And I think we've gotten some real momentum here. I was as stunned as anyone when the gas stove backlash came along. And I wonder, will there be another one like that? And I think yes, because there's so many bad regulations affecting so many appliances, some of which will take effect in the years ahead. Who knows when the next time this issue, no pun intended, is back on the front burner. I think it will happen. My guess will be air conditioners, as Representative Allen said. The cost of air conditioners have gone through the roof. And I guess in Alabama and Georgia, air conditioning is not a luxury. It's a necessity, and that's true for a lot of the U.S. So maybe it'll be that. But I do think this issue is not going away, and I do think we've gotten a very good discussion started.
Well, I'll make a very quick plug. Some of what we heard, it baked into that question and also in the response there from Representative Allen. Ben, you were actually, both of you were a part of a project here developing a blueprint for recommendations for the Congress on how to create those boundaries for the EPA. Now, as we've been talking about, all of these appliance regulations are not limited to the EPA's activities. A good deal of this comes from the Department of Energy standards. But some of those ideas are now in circulation and available. Different colleagues of yours have taken up pieces of our blueprint to carry them forward to try to really create some legislative boundaries for the EPA in the future, regardless of who's in charge at the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue. I'm going to invite each of you perhaps to restate the most important idea that you have for our audience. We have scores of people here that are very interested in appliance regulation. That means they're high information participants in the legislative process. I want to give you a chance for closing remarks. And if it's all right, what we'll do is briefly go Donna, Ben, and then we'll go in reverse order, first with Mr. Palmer, and then to you, Congressman Allen. So, Donna, what's your takeaway, and what are the most important ideas you want to share?
I think the most important idea is the fact that the impacts of these environmental regulations make housing affordability. It creates a bad situation, and it makes it worse, and it also puts barriers up there from people being able to own their own homes. At the end of the day, people want home ownership. And you don't get that when you're adding incremental costs that price hundreds of thousands of people out of the marketplace. Again, the National Association of Home Builders said for every $1,000 you add to the price of a new home, you price out 115,000 people out of home ownership. That means when you have regulations like the furnace appliances that are costing thousands, adding thousands of dollars, you're pricing out 1 million people out of home ownership, and we shouldn't be taking away the American dream that people want to live for in this country.
Thank you for that. I'm just going to underscore every time you talk about price elasticity, I get excited. Ben, major takeaways and closing thoughts.
Well, sometimes I get asked, well, what's wrong with energy efficiency? Well, there's nothing wrong with energy efficiency per se, but energy efficiency is something that can get taken to a foolish extreme. And that's what we so often get with these federal mandates. As I mentioned before, refrigerators that don't last as long, dishwashers that take forever, air conditioners whose price has gone through the roof, et cetera, et cetera. The other point I would make is that these regulations suffer from what many regulations suffer from, and that's the one-size-fits-all problem. The reality is that no two homes are alike. Certainly no two homeowners are alike. And we all know our own individualized circumstances better than any federal regulator at the Department of Energy. So, for example, if it's an appliance you plan on using sparingly, you're never going to earn the upfront costs, the higher upfront costs in the form of energy savings. Or if you plan on selling your house soon, you're never going to earn that upfront cost. So there's all sorts of individualized circumstances. But I think my bottom line point is this isn't really a debate over whether this kind of furnace is better than that kind of furnace. This is a debate of who gets to decide these things, the consumer or the government. And we need to move back towards restoring consumer choice. And I think that's what this discussion and what the Don't Mess With My Home Appliances Act is really all about.
Thank you for that. Gary Palmer, representative from Alabama, do you have closing thoughts for us or any additional instructions if you want to send us out to take action?
Yeah, it's interesting that how the debate and the discussions changed. During the Biden administration, it was all hands on deck, all Green New Deal, pushing these policies. But then all of a sudden, Bill Gates comes out after he had published a book on how to avoid a climate disaster, says, well, we're not all going to burn up after all. The economy's not going to collapse, so we're going to be fine. And then you have Tom Steyer, who's invested millions and millions of dollars in this whole climate change bill, now running for governor of California, Donna. And guess what he's not talking about? He's not talking about climate change. He's talking about affordability. And then you have Carney, the prime minister of Canada, who was Canada's representative to the United Nations on climate. Not only is he not talking about climate change, they're building a pipeline to transport oil to their west coast. So, and I would argue that the public opinion has turned against the climate agenda. It's going to turn against this whole agenda of forcing them to buy appliances they don't want. When you talk about energy efficiency, nobody's opposed to energy efficiency. But when your energy costs are going up at incredible rates, whatever efficiencies you achieve is overtaken by the increase in energy costs. And then when you add to it, as Ben has mentioned several times, and he mentioned in his paper, the unaffordability of these new appliances and the unreliability of them, the consumer comes out a net loser. And I agree 100% with his position that people ought to be able to choose what they want, what works best for them, and what they can afford. Because all of this added up, as Don has pointed out, and you guys have pointed out, has made not only appliances unaffordable, it's really made housing unaffordable for millions of people around the country.
And we know when people spend more on housing, um, that's an essential good. That means they are necessarily spending less on other things that are also goods in their life, savings for education, new school clothes for the kids in the autumn, whatever it might be that is going to make their life better. They're not able to spend their money the way that they see fit. Instead, they're forced into spending it on higher housing costs. Representative Rick Allen of Georgia, you're the man with legislation on this. You've navigated the processes of the House of Representatives to get it queued up and in the schedule with the leadership team so that it will go to the floor. We thank you for that, but I mostly want to invite you here to give us some closing remarks and help me wrap up the program that will be available on YouTube. We're going to make sure to get this around to as many people as we can.
Well, first, I want to thank all of you for getting this message out. That seems to be our biggest problem, is getting the truth out. I welcome this debate on affordability. I mean, it's just common sense. The American people are good at this. Like in healthcare, we want price transparency. I mean, they know what products, they do their research, they know what products to buy, they know what products suit them. And guess what? They can contribute to the affordability issue by driving down prices if we give them the power to do that. Again, this is a grassroots country. Again, I don't understand California. I know some folks, good friends that live there. They're very wealthy. And, they said, hey, it doesn't matter to us what things cost. But, okay, you got to have a workforce. Where are they going to live? Are they going to experience the American dream? We don't want a country that looks like that. We don't have that in Georgia. Although, we need more state choices in this regulatory environment. But, it gets back to ideology as well. People have this ideology, and then they put out, they deceive the American people believing that this is going to actually save them money. And it's not, there's not an ounce of truth to it. And the American people continue to put these same people back in office that are creating the affordable crisis in the first place. It makes my head hurt when I see this happen. So what's critical, number one, and what you're doing today is get the message out there. This is a grassroots country. The American people know what's best for them, and they need to elect leaders who will act in their best interest and not based on some identity politics or ideology that will never work. It's common sense. It needs to be market driven, and let's let the markets determine affordability. And the American people will drive that. That is what has made this the wealthiest country on the face of the earth. And the government is not capable of participating in that by driving all of this regulatory and Green New Deal and all this business. And I'll give you one example that the American people, are hearing out there is that electricity prices are skyrocketing. Well, guess what? You know why electricity prices are skyrocketing in states like California? It's because the state of California has driven everybody to electricity. In Georgia, we have natural gas, and we use natural gas to heat our homes. And my gas unit costs 25% of what these exorbitant heat pumps and whatnot cost that regulate and run electricity. But guess what? When it gets below 30 degrees, that heat pump doesn't work any longer. So then you go to strip heat. And guess what? Strip heat doesn't work very well either. And then you go to people putting electric heaters in each room, and that is driving up demand. And what happens when you drive up demand? The price increases. It's not rocket science. But for whatever reason, there are people out there that are confusing the public. Thank you for your communication to the people of this country to get this right. And let's let the people drive it. We can produce. We're capable of doing amazing things in this country. Innovation, AI. Look what AI is going to do for us. We should be the most affordable country in the world. And of course, Gary's onto these critical rare earth materials and things like that. We've got a lot of work to do. But again, these environmental policies have driven all that offshore. And there's certain essentials that we've got to bring back as far as medications and other things. The Republican conference is working hard to make that happen. And the reason I mentioned the Senate is I hope some senators over there, particularly our two senators from Georgia, will come and coalesce behind what we're trying to do for the American people to make life affordable again. And we can do it. We have the ability to do it. We just have to have the votes to get it done.
I want to thank both of you, as well as my colleague, Ben Lieberman, Donna Jackson of CFACT. My spidey sense is telling me that before I give a couple administrative notes to our audience, Donna has 20 seconds? I don't know what you have here for me.
Okay, I just wanted to add this because I'm from the state of California, and it's been the reason why I've been driven on these issues. In California, what you think of as people that can't afford the cost of living expenses have college degrees. They have bachelor's degrees. They have master's degrees. They're lawyers. They're living in shared housing because they cannot afford it because the environmental policies have made it unaffordable. The other thing is important. The National Association of Realtors says people that own their homes have 40 times the net worth of people who rent, not 40% more, 40 times the net worth. And yet in California, you have rich and you have poor. They look good on paper. They're middle class. They have degrees, but they have the same lifestyle as people who work low wage, unskilled jobs. And that's what they're trying, these environmentalists push, and the left push for all of Americans. A two social class system where there's rich and there's poor, and all of a sudden energy is something that only the rich can afford despite your education level.
Yeah, and as we say back home, preach it.
Preach. I think you just became the choir, Congressman. Thank you.
I appreciate it, sister.
In an energy-rich world, in an energy-rich nation, we're looking forward to helping you develop and implement some energy-rich policies to make the innovation that you're talking about, being driven from the private sector, make that possible, make affordable decisions sit in the hands of consumers. I appreciate both of you and what you're doing. I want to remind everyone that those of you who joined us live, we're going to ask you to do one thing for us, and that is when you get a follow-up email, probably in the next 36 hours, it will include a link to where this conversation is put online. And what I'm going to ask you to do is share that with 3 people. We need more people to be aware of this, to be informed on some of these pieces of information, and then go find those studies, the studies that are on our website that are produced at CFACT, the studies that are referenced by both members of Congress here. So share that information and share this program. We look forward to seeing you in the new year. Some of our event programming includes something on the books for free market medicine. We have a program I'm looking forward to on a discussion on how to reform what I think of as a legal travesty with administrative law judges in these regulatory agencies, and a whole lot more coming your way from the Competitive Enterprise Institute. For today, I'm going to say thank you, and with that, we will sign off. Gentlemen, I really appreciate your help.